Hi, I'm Dr. Mikah, and welcome to Forces of Change.
And I'm Anna Graziani. I'm co-host of Forces of Change. And today we have Shahram Ebadollahi. And today we're talking about his background in his founding of IBM Watson Health as employee number one. He served as Novartis' first chief data and AI officer and now advises organizations through NavAI on achieving meaningful ROI from AI investments in healthcare, giving him unique insight into the collision between AI capabilities and organizational implementation realities. So welcome, Shahram.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Good morning to both of you.
Yeah. Yes, good morning. So Shahram, we'll start with learning a little bit about the arc of your career, and your background really tells quite a story. IBM Research, establishing health informatics, founding Watson Health as employee number one, becoming the Novartis' first chief data and AI officer, and now you're focusing on NavAI. And I'm curious about what connects these chapters. What are you really investigating beneath the surface on how AI transforms healthcare?
Yeah, thank you. Good question to start with because I think that's the story of AI in today's world. um, so, of course, I started at IBM first as a research scientist, and then had the opportunity to start the healthcare research at IBM, which is basically AI, machine learning, pattern recognition, in an application of it to healthcare and life sciences. And very interesting team of people, group of experts I had the privilege of working with, and a lot of interesting science, technology, innovations were produced there. And that actually led to, at the time, IBM was contemplating going deeper into certain industries, one of which was healthcare and life sciences. And then because of those advancements and successes we had in research and in innovation, then a number of us were asked to look into what are the possibilities and potential of having a healthcare-related business. And IBM, of course, as a technology company, the angle was what tools and technologies we can bring to solve problems in healthcare and life sciences. And therefore, I became the first employee. I had a major hand in defining what that thing was, and then standing up that business unit and doing multiple jobs at the same time while we found better people to manage those jobs and then farming it out to them. And then going to Novartis as the chief data and AI officer. And then if you look at it, my background, I'm a scientist. I'm a PhD MBA. And so starting from research, you're doing innovation, but then you say, okay, where is the impact of this thing? I mean, papers and patents and things like that, they're okay. They're essential. That's part of the work. But is where are you impacting the business, the society? How are people using this kind of technology? So that was the impetus behind the business, the larger impact, the platform for potentially larger impact. But then it's actually interesting is technologists, you become so enamored with technology, right? So you develop technology for the sake of technology. Yes, of course, you develop it with the input from clients and partners and so on. But then application of it to real work and where the work gets done and the front lines of healthcare provider, payer, or life sciences, pharmaceutical companies, biopharma, and whatnot, that becomes a whole different game. So that was actually the draw for me to go to the other side of the table and say how these things actually get done in when the technology really matters. And the eye-opening part of that experience, and which is actually what I'm now focusing on, is how organizations are set in their own ways of how work gets done. And technology, as technologies, we think that technology is a solution to all problems, but excuse me, that's not the case. The work gets done in a very different way, and then the human factors come in. The change, the transformation, the behavior of humans, incentives, and things of that sort. So after Novartis, actually, I got the opportunity to chair 24 sessions for Fortune 500 company senior executives who were charged for deploying AI. And what an eye-opening experience that was. Is only 20%, if I want to just summarize it, is of the challenges, problems, anxieties that these people had related to technology. Or maybe 80% was how you really transform business and get value of it. Is not just coming up with the next gadget and the next tool and the next model and so on and so forth, but is how to really change the way we do work. How do we get value out of this thing? And that is now a huge curiosity for me, and that is what occupies my time these days.
Shahram, I'm thinking about what a massive undertaking this is. I mean, we're taking on the entire healthcare system, right? That's what now by AI is aiming to do. And I'm thinking about what the methodology is behind it. How are you approaching systematically this transformation?
Yeah. So first of all, it's not a matter that a single person can take on. I think each of us, as to the extent that we can have impact, we should try. What I realize is actually interesting. A lot of organizations, because of fear of missing out, because of the pressures by their boards and business and stakeholders and so on, and rightfully so, they want to explore how to apply AI, right, and get benefit from it. But then if you look at major healthcare life sciences companies, if you look at their boards, for example. So I was doing a podcast a year and a half ago, and the topic was AI and boards and executive committees of companies and so on in life sciences. So I said, let me do my homework. And I was like searching what are the top life sciences based on revenue, who sits on their board and all of that and so on. It's actually interesting. Are they properly geared towards this world of AI? Do they have the expertise to ask the right questions of the executive teams and the operators on the ground and make the right judgment or help them make the right judgment, right? So the impact here is how to partner with some of these companies who really want to implement these technologies with their senior executives, with their boards, on what the possibilities are for their particular business, regardless of all the jazzy and flashy things we hear every day, unfortunately, about AI, or fortunately. But what really matters to their business, and how to bring it in a methodical and meaningful and measured way, and help them actually deploy. And what do they need to do internally in order to be good recipients of these technologies and adopters of it, which is, as I said, it's just 20% technology. Is how you design your incentives. What are you measuring? Do you even have the talent? How do you rethink the workflow and how work gets done in these companies? So that is the hope that through these kind of consulting and advisory services type of work. Of course, it's like single company, but it's really helping people to think properly or in a better way about this and helping them. And there is a lack of awareness and education in the broader community on how to go about.
Yeah, it
this.
strikes me that there's a bit of a paradox, right? When you think about AI and the possibility of AI in healthcare, there's the possibility of leveraging AI to help us move towards universal healthcare, you know, the possibility of, really democratizing healthcare for everybody in this country. But at the same time, you mentioned corporate boards. We understand that, that a company's, single focus, right, is shareholder return. And, boards are focused on shareholder return. So are they looking at AI through an altruistic lens, or are they looking at AI through kind of the zero sum lens of, hey, how can this accelerate, development pipelines? How can this, help us accelerate our time to market? How can it reduce our overhead costs? I think there's there's a challenge there. And then, the other thing you mentioned, in terms of the challenges that we face, the policy challenges are also very real. And those policy challenges, to the best of my knowledge, have not even begun to be addressed.
Senior executives in any company, the successful ones, need to hold um, extreme opposites at the same time, right? So the successful ones at least are of that subtype. Meaning, yes, they have to cater to the shareholder benefit and value that they're delivering, but also as a healthcare company, as a life sciences company, they want to also put more medicine in the hands of people, help more, treat more conditions that are untreated, or take care of more patients. So these two are not mutually exclusive. It goes into then the core of the leadership, how centered they are, what are they optimizing for, and how they can actually take care of both of these without sacrificing one for the other. Because you can't, you have to generate, run the business in the proper way, because only if you do that, you can help more people get more medicine or get treated and get taken care of, right? So it's not either or, and this is actually successful executives in any company would be able to do that, and so on. With respect to the regulation, this is the lag that exists in any technologies. It doesn't, it's not for AI. Of course, AI, because of the hyper accelerated way that is going, it might be a bigger lag or gap to close for the society, but rules, regulations, safeguarding the interest of the citizens, patients, and their benefits should follow. Now, if you look at the world, there are different regions or thoughts emerging, right? Europe has a particular way of thinking about this, which is very putting the guardrails up and constraining. Here in our country is a different methodology. Maybe in Asia is different. It goes into all these policies are setting up the so-called carrots and sticks in order to effectuate a particular outcome, right? So what are we trying to optimize in different regions? And the jury is still out which approach is going to be right. But I mean, at the company level and at the societal level, one needs to actually look at the benefits accrued to the citizens by using these kind of technologies, safeguarding their interests and their privacy, as you said earlier, and also making sure, like any other, let's call it the omni-use type of technology, which AI is an omni-use type of a technology. Bad actors cannot do things that are not or detrimental to society.
I'm thinking about a couple of things here, Shahram, one of which is change management. And, you talked a little bit about this a couple of minutes ago, but I'm thinking about, we've all been a part of major digital transformations and in our past work experiences, but this is not the same. And I'm curious what you're thinking about as far as industry readiness, adoption readiness by users, but also by, the general population, those of us who are, patients of the systems, really all stakeholders. Yeah, I'm thinking about change management, readiness, and adoption.
It's about decisions and more efficient and accelerating decisions and higher quality decisions. And decisions, what goes into the making of a decision is the information upon which you make that decision and the judgment that goes on top of that information that is presented to you. So when we make decisions, is we gather some information, we do some background research, and we do some studies and so on, and we come up with hypotheses, and then we use our own judgment, which is our accumulated experience, expertise, all of that, and put a, let's call it a value on different choices, let's call it utility in economics, and then we say, okay, let's go left versus go right. Now, the break that is happening in a lot of the organizations is AI accelerates access to information. not just past information, collecting and summarizing everything, but predicting what could happen or what are the options that are in front of us. And then the human is the person who needs to judge how to act upon that in order to make a decision. And then the question becomes, which judgments could also be delegated to the machine, and which judgments need to stay with the human, and for what reason? Maybe it's regulation, maybe it's other types of things that are of high risk to be actually delegated to the machine. But it's that awareness, that education, and this very detailed analysis of the decisions and understanding of the business, and alongside that, for that change management, where I see a lot of failures happen in large organizations is the lack of adjusting incentives in the organizations. What different people are incentivized to do or not to do? Because at the end of it is behavior change, is human behavior change. Nothing to do with technology. And that is how you measure, how you penalize, or how you incentivize certain things.
I often think about, in particular, in arenas like healthcare and life sciences, how they balance, the models, because many models out there that are being used are probabilistic. And it seems like you have to have a hybrid model, a very, very well-tuned hybrid model, with a probabilistic layer, but also a big deterministic layer, that's balancing those decisions, as you mentioned, so that you don't go askew.
Yeah. Pharma companies, life sciences companies are familiar. I mean, one of the key metrics or measures in drug discovery is probability of success. So you are working on a molecule. At every step, you're attributing to it a probability of how successful this molecule is going to be, because you have to attribute investments to it and people and push it forward, or decide not to push forward. And because every pharma company works on a big portfolio of such molecules, so they have to decide how to attribute investments to that. So that probabilistic thinking exists, but it's interesting, for key decisions, that probabilistic thinking is early in the process, because you work on a huge portfolio of molecules. Some of them might work, some might not. And then at the end, it takes 10, 12 years on average to get to the end of the pipeline and have a medicine in the market, right? But when it's about creating revenue on a split-second decision, that becomes a little bit of a, hey, let's wait, or can I really delegate this to machine? Without going into detail, and such an example is what medicine, in what market, how much of it you put out, you produce, you make available, at what price, right? Machines can do this very, very well, right? But at the end of it, on a side-by-side study, even the machine can do it better. They still want to go with that person who has been doing this job for 30 years, and there's a trust. It's the issue of trust, because if any mistake, then it's very hard to recover from it. Why you see that online companies are doing very well with AI is because they can do these kind of A/B studies very fast. So if I'm like an online retail shop, of many exists, I don't want to name any particular thing. If I'm selling this pen, so this is blue and red one, I can actually put both of them, different prices. Split second, I know how many people bought this one versus the other one, and I can adjust my decision, right? It's very hard in a lot of businesses to do that. And that is actually a point of frustration because if I make any change, how long do I need to wait for it to see the effect of it? That closing that feedback loop. And because part of AI is looking at outcomes that is generating and learning from it in order to adjust your decisions. So that might not exist, or it might be very costly, versus this pen, I might lose 1 cent on it, and I can actually recover it because 2 seconds after I can switch my decision and put
No, I'm
everything
sure
as
that
a blue
all
pen.
the pharma companies are using that, A/B testing, multivariate testing, in their marketing for sure. We see it. We see more pharma
Yeah.
marketing in the United States than probably anywhere in the world. Um, yeah, you mentioned something that's really intriguing. When you think about how they're making the decisions in terms of the adoption of AI, it strikes me that when you're thinking about agent to human ratio, obviously hiring PhDs is very, very expensive. Whereas generating agents that are capable of doing PhD level work is significantly cheaper. What's the calculus that the companies in healthcare are using when they're thinking about AI and transformation, the future of work, and how that may change the ratios of employees that they have inside their four walls in the years to come?
On the calculus of on where the balance is going to be, I'm not sure. I mean, we have to wait and see how these agents develop in the life sciences healthcare space. But there is an issue of again going into trust. So if you're a life sciences company, if you're a financial company, because that is also regulated, so to speak, right? What do you need to have in place before you can let these agents go loose and actually do their things, right? So the technology is catching up on that. Now you have technologies coming out to agents who can hire agents who understand their context, and also technologies for putting a wrapper around agents with respect to audit trails, regulatory compliance, and things like that. So let's say those core technologies are in place in order to use these kind of agents. Then it becomes what decisions, going back to the topic of decisions, you are trying to agentify, right? And delegating completely to the machine. And where does the human need to come in? Let me give you an example. An organization was running by me their thoughts about how to expedite part of a clinical trial using AI. So I said, okay, lay down for me, explain to me the step-by-step process of what you're doing, and tell me where you're thinking that your AI solution is going to be material. So let's say they put a 10-step process, and in 3 steps, because it has a lot of text documents and so on, and the machines are very good at doing that, phenomenal, you can do that. But then it came to an abrupt halt in step 5 because there was only a human who had to make this decision, right? And I said, okay, how much saving are you going to have based on this? Maybe these many minutes or these many hours and the corresponding dollar value of it. So, okay, my recommendation to you is don't waste your time, because you can agentify as much as you want a lot of these things, but the weakest link, I mean, you can be as efficient or as fast as your weakest link, right? So then if it has to stop and decision has to be made by a human and it goes at the human speed, not the machine and agent speed, then should you do this, right? And that, especially in regulated spaces, comes down to what is permitted and what guardrails exist there and what do you need to comply with.
Sharm, you and I met at a retreat a few months ago now, focused on awakening the transformative leader within. And much of what we discussed was the relationship between capitalism, profits, and purpose, and sort of navigating from a place of purpose. And I'm thinking about when AI is really optimizing for shareholder value and really kind of making efficiency happen inside of organizations and the relationship to patient outcomes. Wondering what your perspective is on that in light of our shared time together at this particular retreat. Where is the place of purpose in this balance between profits and patients or
Yeah.
healthcare and patient care? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Actually, let me, in order to talk about this, go to the earlier topic that I raised on this personal data, patient data or citizens' health data. Although it is very interesting to allow people, us, hold our data, decide with whom we're sharing it, who can have access to it, for what purpose, and so on. That is not happening today, right? There are companies that actually hoard data of consumers without consumers even knowing and making a lot of money off of it, right? Don't need to name any of them. Can we imagine a world in which people are the deciders of their own data? And by the way, this is a much more pronounced problem in the age of AI, because a lot of the debacles that happen with AI is people using content and data that they were not supposed to and train their AI with it. I mean, there are lawsuits and you can read about them in the news. In healthcare, that is actually more detrimental because it's about health and wellness and privacy of a person. Now, there are bunch of startups, companies who are trying to make a dent in this thing. But to your point, when they have to optimize for the capitalistic aspect of it, they cannot get to a scale. They have to resort to a particular treatment area, certain rare diseases, certain types of cancer, because they have to make money, and a pharma company might need a cohort of people with those rare diseases or those type of cancers, and they will pay for that. So they always start with that big vision, but then have to go to a small corner in order to make the ends meet for their business and make the investors happy for the money that they're putting in their venture, right? Now, the thing that myself and a number of collaborators who are actually highly positioned in various parts of the healthcare ecosystem of this country is, could there be a different model? Could there be a combination of a non-for-profit that keeps the interest of the patient or citizen in mind, and let's call it a fiduciary responsibility to them, connected with a money-making or for-profit entity? I mean, not that non-for-profit is not money-making, but a for-profit entity, and the interaction between these two, going back to Mikah's earlier question, to hold the both ends of this issue at the same time, to look after people, allow them to make the decision, and that fiduciary responsibility, while you can also make profits, you can also actually advance and make innovations in this that is required in this space, and both up. It's a delicate balance, but I think it could be done. And the people who run that, going back to that session that we were together, is those leaders have to have a very well-defined purpose and have to be very clear about what they want out of this thing, right? Because they have to be able to hold both ends of it in order to serve the patients and the community and the citizens, and also the capitalistic aspect of it, which is actually welcome, because that is what makes the engine of innovation work.
Shahram, one of the things we ask all of our guests, when you're thinking about the forces of change that are out there today, really driving society, driving humanity, what are the four forces that you think about most often, and why?
For me, there are four things that are in play. There are actually making features in how we think in the society, and everything. And they also clash with each other somehow, in some form. One is this AI technology is permeating everything, right? So from personal lives to societal to businesses to governments to the world. And it's like, people make this parallel, but it's very different than the other types of technology innovations. It's like, it's going to become a utility, so to speak. It's going to be everywhere. It's like electricity, where you plug in something and voila, your system or your device works. So this becoming an infrastructure, so to speak, or becoming part of every aspect of our lives, personal or professional. The second element, or the second force, is this lack of fast adoption, or the slowness of the adoption with respect to personal and to businesses, which we talked about. So this technology is moving very, very fast, is permeating everything, is becoming ubiquitous and accessible, while as a person, as a business, as a government, as a society, we are lagging behind with respect to the adoption of it. So these creates actually frictions among themselves. Then the third one becomes the topic of data sovereignty in general. If you look at the news, a lot of countries are now putting a lot of huge investments in different regions, in Europe, in Middle East, in the US, everywhere, in Asia. Huge investment in infrastructure for AI, huge data centers, compute centers with the latest chips and technologies that goes into it, energy sources that goes into it, and so on and so forth, and owning it. Right? Maybe it's a matter of national interest now to basically sit on top of that infrastructure rather than a shared infrastructure. Maybe it was COVID that opened people's eyes because it broke the supply chain routes and so on. And people became introspective, so to speak, and that owning this infrastructure becomes important. And the other aspect that is very important in sovereignty is the data sovereignty. And people, as a business, what data you have, how you guard that as a country, and so on, because AI is fed by data, right? Is built on data. And the fourth force is this issue of the cracks that are happening in trust, or the deficit of trust. Because of these changes that are happening, there is deficit of trust in the technology. There's so many vendors out there. Which one to trust, right? There are businesses that are offering these kind of things, and how they're building it, how to trust what is being built is appropriate for use, and also trust in judgment. How, if I'm putting AI to use and someone is making a judgment on it, how to trust that. So if you look at all of these, there are four forces: this technology, the adoption, the issue of sovereignty, the issue of trust, that are actually coming to a head or clashing with each other in one form or the other. And the society and the businesses actually need to find a proper answer, or the answer that works for them, in order to bring all these four different forces together for them.
Shahram, we ask all of our guests one particular question. Relative to the forces of change society is facing, what is the most important book recently published that you think people should read, and why?
Yeah. For these four forces that I talked about, I went into my memory of what books I've read that actually closest represent these. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a book that mapped to all four of them. But the one that maps to a good portion of it was the book called The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman. He was the co-founder of DeepMind, Google DeepMind, that did the AlphaGo game and so on. And I believe he is now the CEO of AI at Microsoft. So that actually talks very nicely about this accelerated pace of the technology, and this chasm between that and the adoption of it, and so on. And of course, it talks about some other interesting aspects as well. But I found that one closest, and also the book by Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt was the ex-CEO of Google Alphabet. That was also interesting from a geopolitical aspect of what I talked about.
Well, thank you, Shahram. Definitely want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, your leadership, all the learning over the arc of your career, and what you're doing in building AI in healthcare from research through enterprise deployment. I think we're all ready for some change to the system, and we look forward to seeing the changes that you're driving through Nav AI. How do people stay in touch with you? How can they follow your work?
They can either find me on LinkedIn or just send me an email to shahram@navai.info.
Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Forces of Change. If you found this conversation valuable, follow us at forcesofchange.fm and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep questioning and learning about the forces of change among us.